Someone snuck into my yard with bolt cutters. Turns out HOA Karen didn't like my no trespassing sign or the fact I was winning, so I hit upload. Next thing you know, Splashgate was trending. And Karen, she went from HOA president to meme queen in 48 hours. If they're bold enough to steal your peace, you better be smart enough to live stream the war. The morning after the group message, something shifted, not dramatically, just enough to make your skin crawl. The woman who usually waved during her power walk didn't make eye contact. The dad across the street, who once asked Eric about filter brands, now stared into his hedge like it owed him money. And at the bus stop, where Lila usually stood chatting with the neighborhood girls, there was an unfamiliar silence. One of the girls, a freckled kid named Abby, whispered something to her friend and then stepped away, tugging her backpack tighter. Lila turned around, confused. Her smile faltered. "They said our pool is illegal," she told Jenna that evening. "They said my daddy's stealing water." Jenna knelt beside her, wiping sunscreen off her nose and trying to smile, but her eyes flickered with worry. "That's not true, baby. Some people just get confused when they believe everything they read on the internet." By Thursday, Karen's crusade leveled up. Around noon, a knock rattled the front door. When Eric opened it, Karen stood there with two HOA board members flanking her like they were filming a low-budget HOA-themed crime show. One was a pudgy man in khakis named Leonard, who always smelled like vinegar. The other, a woman in an aggressively pastel sweater named Barb, clutching an iPad like it was a judge's gavel. "We're here for a compliance verification," Karen announced. "Per HOA protocol." "You mean trespassing?" Eric asked flatly. Karen offered a thin smile. "You agreed to random compliance checks in the bylaws, page 14. Page 14 also says nothing about interrogating people like you're the chlorinated FBI," Eric muttered, but stepped aside. He wasn't going to give them an excuse. They didn't ask to walk through the house. They walked around it. Eric followed, arms crossed. Karen stopped at the filter pump and scribbled notes. Barb took photos of the no trespassing sign on the gate like it was graffiti. Leonard, for some reason, measured the width of the side path with a yellow tape and grunted. Then Karen pulled out her phone and began filming a slow pan across the yard. "What exactly are you recording?" Eric asked. "Documenting compliance," she said, "for community transparency." "You mean slandering my property so you can spin another HOA bedtime story?" he shot back. She didn't answer. Instead, she focused her camera on a patch of wet footprints near the deck and whispered, "Might be evidence of unscheduled pool access." That's when Jenna came out. Her face was pale. "What is going on?" she asked, holding Lila's hand. The little girl clutched a popsicle and looked terrified. Karen swung the camera toward them like she was expecting a confession. "Just documenting property conditions," she repeated. "Your daughter might want to step back from the water line. Liability concerns." "She lives here," Jenna said, voice shaking. "She's 8. What exactly do you think is happening?" Karen didn't blink. "Just following protocol." That evening, Eric checked the HOA portal out of sheer curiosity and found a new post uploaded by Karen. A video titled "Non-Compliant Property Raises Concerns, a Cautionary Example," featuring muted clips of their backyard, pixelated slightly but unmistakably theirs. The voiceover wasn't Karen, it was some AI-generated narration, monotone and sterile. Homeowners are reminded that recreational features require strict scheduling during water sensitivity season. The video had 7 comments. 4 of them said disturbing. One said entitled much, and the last said simply, "This is why we need stronger oversight." Then came the letter. It wasn't in the mail. It was slid under their door. On HOA letterhead, "Notice of scheduled hearing, property use conflict resolution," it read. The phrasing was sterile, but the meaning was clear. The HOA was holding a trial for their pool. Eric held the paper in his hand, then read it aloud to Jenna. She said nothing, just rubbed her temple and exhaled slowly. Outside, a sprinkler clicked on, watering a lawn that didn't belong to them. Eric stared out into the dusk, feeling something settle in his chest. Not defeat, not yet, but the kind of pressure that comes right before a dam bursts. He didn't know it then, but Karen was just getting warmed up. Overpine's Commons smelled like dry carpet, burnt coffee, and false authority. The folding chairs creaked under skeptical neighbors, most of whom showed up just to watch the fireworks. Eric walked in carrying a manila folder thick with documentation, blueprints, permits, the county approval letter, even the invoice from the pool contractor dated 2 years prior. Jenna sat beside him, her jaw tight. Lila stayed home with her grandmother. No 8-year-old should have to watch her father defend his right to own water. Karen sat at the head of the table, like a suburban Caesar, her clipboard laid out like a sword. Beside her were Barb and Leonard, nodding like they were hypnotized. Karen opened the meeting with a fake clearing of the throat that sounded like a performance. Tonight's agenda involves reviewing potential misuse of communal aquatic resources, she announced, as though she were unveiling a nuclear treaty violation. Mr. Monroe, please present your defense. Eric stood, unfolding his papers like a lawyer in a cheap courtroom drama. This is my property, he began, placing the documents on the table. Built legally, approved, private. The HOA has no jurisdiction over the use of my pool. Karen didn't wait. Your tone is hostile, she said, raising a hand like a traffic cop. Let's remain civil. I'm being fined for swimming, Eric said, turning to the room. What exactly would you call civil? Karen tapped her clipboard dramatically. Failure to post shared usage hours, non-compliance with seasonal fairness clauses, installation of exclusionary signage. Eric's eyes widened. You mean the not your pool, Karen sign? A few neighbors chuckled under their breath. Karen pressed her lips together. Furthermore, she continued, it's been noted that your filtration system operates past HOA quiet hours and may create sonic disturbance. It's a pump, not a nightclub, Eric muttered. The room remained silent except for the scribbling of notes and the occasional clink of someone's keychain. At the far end of the table sat a young woman in a navy blue hoodie, clearly the youngest person on the board. She hadn't said a word, but she looked increasingly uncomfortable. Her eyes darted between Eric's documents and Karen's expressions. When Eric tried to speak again, Karen cut him off. This is not an open forum. You've had your statement. I was still talking. And now you're not, Karen turned to the others. Due to repeated non-compliance, the board will motion to implement shared access scheduling. Saturdays and Sundays, noon to 6. Eric laughed, loud and hollow. You're assigning time slots to my backyard. Correct, Karen replied, smiling like she'd solved hunger. As a gesture of compromise and in accordance with community equity goals. You mean your power trip? He snapped. Leonard cleared his throat. You agreed to the charter when you moved in. No, I agreed to mow my lawn and not raise wolves. Not to donate my backyard to the swimming socialists of Silver Pines. Karen banged her clipboard once dramatically. The decision is final. Jenna stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair. This is a joke, she said. No, honey, Eric replied quietly. Jokes are supposed to be funny. They left the meeting to the sound of shuffling papers and murmurs that sounded a lot like guilt wrapped in beige cardigans. But what cut deeper than the absurdity was the silence. No one stood up. No one defended them, except maybe the girl in the hoodie who looked down and said nothing. That night, Eric stood in his darkened kitchen, staring out the window. The moon cast soft light over the pool, now silent and still. He poured himself a glass of water out of sheer defiance and sat at the counter. Something beeped from his phone, a notification from the backyard motion sensor. Curious, he opened the security app. What he saw made him drop the glass. There in the grainy night vision feed was Karen, clad in a bathrobe, barefoot, stepping through his gate like a thief in a spa. She dipped a toe into the water, then another. Then, slowly, she slid in and began swimming lazy laps, calm as a monk in a monastery. Eric hit record. He didn't say a word, but his face, reflected in the screen, said it all. Game on. Eric didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, Karen, doing casual breaststrokes through his backyard pool like it was a resort she booked with HOA points. The next morning, he poured 3 cups of coffee and drank them all before 9:00 a.m. Then he sat at his computer, pulled the footage off the security cam, and clipped the cleanest minute he could find. No commentary, no filters, just cold, time-stamped night vision of a barefoot woman in a robe, trespassing into a pool she once fined him for touching. It was hauntingly serene and absolutely damning. He uploaded the clip to 3 different cloud accounts, backed it up on a USB, and labeled the file Chlorine Hypocrisy, Exhibit A. At 11:42 a.m., Eric slid a manila envelope into the compliance drop box at the Hales Mailbox Center. On the front, he scrawled, ATN, Review and Ethics Subcommittee. No signature, no commentary, just the footage plus a copy of the HOA bylaws Karen had so conveniently quoted during the meeting, the part explicitly stating private residential amenities were outside board jurisdiction unless explicitly donated to community use. He walked away from the drive box feeling something he hadn't felt in weeks: power. Not revenge, not anger, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had truth and truth had receipts. That peace lasted 5 hours. Around 5:00 p.m., a folded notice appeared on his front doormat, tucked inside a plastic sleeve like it was a coupon from hell. The paper was yellow this time, different from the hot pink violation and orange warning. This one was labeled Escalation Notice, Violation of HOA Privacy Guidelines. The offense? Unauthorized surveillance and distribution of footage involving a sitting board member. The fine? $1,000, 0 cents. Eric laughed so hard he nearly choked. Jenna wasn't laughing. "They're fining you for catching her in the act," she shouted, holding the paper like it might catch fire. "They're punishing you for catching her breaking her own rule?" "Yep," Eric said, rubbing his temples. "They call the footage invasive. Of a camera on our property recording a trespasser. This is a parody," Jenna muttered. "We're living in a suburban version of the Twilight Zone." At school, things weren't better. Lila came home with her usual bounce, dimmed. When Jenna asked what was wrong, Lila said softly, "Nobody sat next to me today." Abby said her mom told her I was dangerous. "Dangerous?" Eric repeated, heart sinking. "Because of a pool?" "Because we don't share," she whispered. That was it. That was the crack that hit the dam again. Eric had played by the rules. He had shown up. He had submitted documentation. He had filmed proof. And now, because he stood his ground, his daughter was being cast as the villain in a story written by someone who thought a clipboard came with a crown. That night, Eric checked the HOA portal again. There was a new post from Karen, this time under the section titled Upcoming Governance Adjustments. It read, "Due to growing concerns about fair use of aquatic amenities, the HOA board will be reviewing emergency proposals for restructuring access rights to residential pools in accordance with Clause 8B. Clause 8B. Eric had read the bylaws front to back. There was no Clause 8B, at least not when he bought the house. Jenna stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. "They're making it up as they go." "No," Eric said, his voice flat. "They're building a trap. They're setting the stage so when they do try to take the next step, it'll look justified." He clicked out of the portal, opened his file labeled HOA War Crimes, and added a new folder titled 8B Initiative. Outside, the lights by the pool flickered on, motion detected. But when Eric checked the feed, it wasn't Karen, just a raccoon knocking over the flamingo float. Still, he stayed awake for hours, watching the grainy footage loop, waiting for the next move. And when it came, it wouldn't be in the dark, it would be broad daylight, and it would change everything. The next morning, Eric stood in the backyard with a roll of 8-foot privacy mesh, a bag of zip ties, and a face that said, "I'm done playing neighborly." Jenna watched from the kitchen window, sipping coffee like it was whiskey. First came the netting, tall, tight, impenetrable, attached to the fence like a curtain over a crime scene. Then came the signage, bold white letters on black aluminum, drilled into the gate at eye level. "Not your pool, Karen." A second sign followed beneath it, smaller but crueler in tone. "Unauthorized swimmers will be chlorinated with prejudice." That afternoon, Eric installed motion sensors around the pool perimeter. Not the cheap kind that beep politely, the kind that triggered a speaker system rigged to a pre-recorded warning that played on a loop. The message? Calm, firm, and devastatingly passive-aggressive. "You are approaching a private pool on private property. Step away. You are being recorded. This is not your amenity." The first time the speaker triggered, it was just a squirrel. The second time, a HOA board member walking his dog suspiciously close to Eric's fence. The dog barked, the speaker barked back. The man flinched, nearly dropped the leash, and muttered something about escalating tensions. Eric just smiled through the camera feed and labeled the moment "Panic at the Poolside." Karen predictably retaliated, not with logic, not with legal documents, but with crocodile tears and smartphone footage. She posted a video in the Silver Pines Facebook group standing outside the now fortified Monroe property. Her eyes shimmered. Her voice quivered. "This is what our community has become," she said, gesturing at the netting like it was barbed wire. "A place where cooperation is replaced by confrontation, where simple fairness is met with hostility." She even wiped a perfectly timed tear like she was auditioning for a daytime soap. The comments came fast and furious. Some neighbors praised her for bravery. Others questioned if she finally lost her HOA-issued mind. One said, "Didn't she swim in that pool like 2 days ago?" Another wrote, "Someone get this lady a towel and a therapist." Eric didn't reply. He posted nothing. He simply kept building. That same night, another notice appeared on his door, this time sealed in an envelope marked, "Official HOA action pending." Inside was a letter from the board stating they were reviewing the activation of Emergency Clause 8C, which, according to their latest update, granted temporary shared access to underutilized community resources in the interest of public unity. Eric sat on the porch reading the letter like it was written in crayon. "Underutilized community resource?" Jenna asked. "It's a pool," Eric said flatly. "In our yard. Paid for. Permitted. Cleaned with my own 2 hands." He held up the letter. "They're not asking anymore. They're coming." Jenna nodded slowly. "Then let them come." 2 nights later, the cameras triggered again, 2:37 a.m. Eric checked the feed, assuming another possum party. But this time, the motion sensor caught something different. A figure in a hoodie, moving low along the back fence, gloved hands, flashlight beam off. The figure pulled out bolt cutters and leaned into the mesh like they were slicing cake. The camera caught every frame, the cut, the crawl, the moment they slipped into the yard. Eric didn't yell, didn't turn on the floodlights. He hit record, then walked quietly to the control panel and triggered the speaker system manually. The voice echoed like a judgment. "You are trespassing. You are being recorded. Local authorities will be notified." The figure froze, then scrambled back, dropping the cutters in the grass. They ran. Eric kept the footage, added it to the digital folder now labeled HOA Ops Night Entries. He stared at the screen long after the backyard returned to silence. Something had shifted. This wasn't about water anymore. It was war. And tomorrow, he would make sure the world saw it. Eric didn't post the footage right away. He waited, reviewed it, edited it carefully. No dramatic music, no slow zooms, just facts. A clean, time-stamped video sequence. Bolt cutters slicing mesh, a hooded figure crawling through a private fence, followed by a second clip. Karen, serene in her nighttime swim, backstroked like the water owed her rent. Over it, he layered a calm voiceover. "My name's Eric Monroe. This is my home, my backyard, my pool. I built it, paid for it, maintain it. Last month I was fined $1,000, 0 cents for using it. Last night someone broke in. This is not about water. This is about control." He uploaded it to Facebook with the caption, "They want my pool. They cut my fence. You tell me who's in violation." Then he sat back and waited. The video spread fast. Too fast. Within 3 hours, it had 1,200 shares, including a repost by the Colorado Sentinel's local outrage correspondent. By the end of the day, they'd run the headline, "Man fined $1,000, 0 cents for using his own pool. HOA calls it shared amenity." And the comments exploded. Some were furious. This is theft wrapped in HOA jargon. Others laughed. When you can't afford a pool, just gaslight someone into sharing theirs. A few created memes. One showed Karen mid-breaststroke with the caption, "Came for the control, stayed for the chlorine." Another called it Splashgate. A third showed a pool with yellow tape and the words, "Crime scene, do not swim." Jenna watched it unfold from the living room, flipping between tabs and sipping tea like it was sweet justice. Even Leela smiled a little when she saw a drawing someone posted of a cartoon Karen floating in a donut floaty being chased by a very angry duck labeled HOA lawsuit. But Eric didn't celebrate yet. He knew better. Karen wasn't the type to retreat. She was the type to regroup. Sure enough, that night Karen posted her own response. A shaky, vertical video from her patio lit by what appeared to be a single IKEA floor lamp. Her mascara was smudged just enough to feel performative. I just want to clarify, she sniffled, that I only entered the Monroe's yard to inspect a suspected filtration issue. As a member of the HOA board, it's my duty to ensure safety compliance. I never intended to violate boundaries, and I certainly never swam in anyone's pool for personal pleasure. The tears came on cue. The comments under her post were a battlefield. Karen girl, we have the footage. You swam 5 full laps, not checked a pump. You're the HOA, not Homeland Security. Some diehard supporters chimed in too, calling Eric a provocateur, accusing him of weaponizing narrative and undermining neighborly order. One even wrote, maybe he should have just shared. It's just water. Eric didn't respond. He didn't need to. The clip spoke louder than any thread war could. At 10:36 p.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered anyway. Mr. Monroe? The voice said, gravelly and calm. This is Delaney. I got your message. Eric sat up. You're the HOA lawyer? Used to be. Now I sue them. I just filed a formal complaint with the county zoning board. I reviewed your documentation. They're bluffing with that 8C clause. And the fine? Eric asked. Baseless, maybe even illegal. So what happens next? There was a pause. Then Delaney said, next, we make 'em bleed on paper. The call ended. Eric stared at his phone for a moment, heart pounding, not with fear, but momentum. Outside, the lights flicked on again. Another squirrel, another false alarm. But this time, Eric didn't feel dread. He felt ready. Because now the HOA wasn't just fighting a quiet homeowner. They were fighting a man with a camera, a lawyer, and 50,000 angry strangers watching online. And Karen, she was about to realize her clipboard didn't come with immunity. 3 days after the video went viral, Eric heard the sound of government-grade knock. 2 sharp raps, deliberate and efficient. He opened the door to find a man in a tan windbreaker with a clipboard under one arm and a laminated badge clipped to his chest. County Zoning Inspector, Jefferson County Division. The man introduced himself as Mr. Hoffman, asked to see the pool, and stepped in with the kind of quiet confidence that said, I don't care about Facebook drama, I care about paperwork. They walked the perimeter. Hoffman measured the fence height, reviewed the original blueprints Eric provided, checked the permit number stamped in faded ink near the filtration panel, and nodded as he flipped through each page. Everything's in order, he finally said. This isn't a community resource. It's a permitted private residential feature. He looked up, eyeing the Not Your Pool Karen sign. Colorful, he said, but legal. Eric exhaled just slightly. Hoffman pulled a form from his clipboard and handed it over. Here's a written confirmation. If they fine you again, refer them directly to County Code 12.9A. And if they try to access this again, call us, not the HOA. He nodded once, then turned and walked back to his car, leaving behind the quiet authority of the law and a man who finally had more than just video receipts. That Friday, the HOA called an emergency meeting at Silver Pines Commons. This time, they didn't expect what came through the doors. Dozens of residents packed into the beige room, some curious, some angry, most holding copies of Eric's zoning documents printed from his social media post. A few carried signs. One read, "Private means private." Another, "Karen-free zone now." Karen sat at the head of the folding table, flanked by Leonard and Barb like nothing had changed, though her hands trembled slightly as she organized her paperwork. She opened with the same script she always used. Let's begin by reviewing our shared responsibilities as neighbors. But her voice was swallowed by murmurs. Then something rare happened. Someone stood up. It was Denise Harper, the same neighbor who used to host the block's 4th of July barbecue. I didn't say anything before, she began, because I didn't want drama. But when my kids saw the video of Karen swimming in Eric's pool, he asked if the HOA owns our backyard too. A few people chuckled. I realized this isn't about rules, it's about control. And I don't want my name tied to that anymore. Others followed. A father with 2 toddlers said he was once fined $200, 0 cents, because his kids' toys were visible from the sidewalk. A retired veteran said Karen threatened to report his flagpole for excessive height. The dam broke. Testimony flowed. Eric didn't speak. He didn't have to. Then the young woman in the navy hoodie, Kelsey, the quietest member of the board, raised her hand. I move to remove Karen Sullivan from her role as HOA president, effective immediately. Silence. Karen blinked, stunned. You're being manipulated, she barked. This is mob rule. That man, she jabbed a finger at Eric, used social media to turn you against order. From the back, someone called out, No, Karen, you used order to turn us against each other. A hand went up, then another and another. 5 board members. The motion passed. Karen stood slowly, still trying to save face. You'll regret this, she warned. This community will spiral. But no one responded. As she walked out, someone started recording on their phone. She paused at the door and glared at the lens. Too late. Within the hour, the clip hit Twitter. Karen ousted from HOA. The final lap. Within a day, memes exploded. One showed Karen Photoshop in a pool float shaped like a crown. The caption, Queen of Chlorine Dethroned. Another had her in cartoon water wings sobbing, They took my clipboard. That weekend, the HOA issued a statement. Fines against the Monroe family were voided. Clause 8C was removed, and future shared grouper policies would require a full neighborhood vote. The board was officially restructuring. But Karen hadn't left. Her house was still at the end of Birch Lane, blinds drawn, and Eric knew this wasn't over. Not yet, because tyrants rarely walk away quietly. And some clipboards are heavier than others. It started with envelopes, handwritten, unassuming. A dozen of them showed up in Eric's mailbox the following week, tucked between junk flyers and a water bill. Inside each one was a small card, most just a few words scrawled in awkward, apologetic handwriting. We should have said something. Sorry for the silence. You were right before we were ready to admit it. Some had baked goods taped inside. One included a drawing from a neighborhood kid, Leela and her dad smiling beside a pool, while a cartoon Karen floated away in a rubber duck floaty labeled retirement. For the first time in a long time, Eric didn't feel watched, he felt seen. 2 weeks after the emergency meeting, the restructured HOA board, now led by Kelsey in a blazer 3 sizes too big for her confidence, sent out a neighborhood-wide announcement. It read, All previously issued fines related to private property misuse are officially voided. Moving forward, any future HOA action regarding private amenities will require full board approval and verified zoning documentation. Private means private. Barb and Leonard had quietly stepped down. The clipboard dynasty had collapsed. That Friday, Eric lit the grill. He kept it low-key. No flyers, no invites, just an open gate and the smell of hickory smoke drifting down Birch Lane. Neighbors trickled in. Denise brought lemonade. Mr. Jacobs brought ribs. Someone set up lawn chairs. Someone else brought cupcakes. No one mentioned the war. They just laughed and passed plates. Jenna smiled more that evening than she had in months. Lila ran around barefoot, spraying her friends with a dolphin-shaped squirt gun and yelling, This is my wall. No one stopped her. No one dared. At sunset, Eric stood by the fence, adjusting the new metal sign he just finished screwing into place. It gleamed in gold paint, bold and proud. Private property, Karen free since July. The crowd laughed when they saw it. Someone raised a beer, someone took a photo, a few said it should be trademarked. Eric just smiled and went back to the grill, flipping burgers and listening to the sound of peace. The kind you only notice when you've had to earn it. As the night wound down, Jenna handed out extra hot dogs and Lila passed out little hand-drawn VIP pool passes to her favorite guests. One was labeled, For Kelsey, the cool HOA lady. Kelsey blushed and tucked it in her pocket like it was a badge of honor. For the first time, the community didn't feel like a committee. It felt like neighbors again. The stars came out, the laughter softened, people headed home, waving goodnight under porch lights. Eric stayed out, sitting at the pool's edge, feet in the water, holding the last soda in his hand like it was a trophy. Jenna joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. For a moment there was silence. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. One new message, Karen Sullivan, let's talk. He stared at it for a moment, then locked the phone, set it down, and slid into the water. He swam a single lap under the moonlight, slow and steady, no rush, no interruptions. As he reached the far end and turned to float on his back, he closed his eyes. She could talk to the fence, she could talk to the bylaw, she could talk to her clipboard. But tonight, Eric wasn't listening. He was swimming in peace, finally. Some fights aren't about fences or water. They're about the line between what's yours and what they think they can take. Eric didn't just protect a pool, he protected the principle that privacy isn't a suggestion and control doesn't come with a clipboard. In a world where petty power often hides behind policy, standing up calmly, smartly, and with receipts is sometimes the loudest move you can make. And when the community wakes up, that's when true peace begins. So now I ask you, if someone tried to fine you for using your own backyard, would you fold or float? Let me know in the comments. Like if you've ever dealt with a power-hungry Karen, share this with someone who's had just enough HOA nonsense. And remember, chlorine washes off, but dignity, that sticks.